Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom to those in the lobby. They'll come in. They'll make their way in when they realize the importance of what's happening here. Well, this is our Shabbat Hagadol. You can see it's called the Great Shabbat, and that is what they call in tradition the Shabbat before Passover. And the tradition is, believe it or not, to talk about Passover. So I will be informing you as to how to get your dishes properly kosher, and reminding you of how to burn the chametz, and how to boil your counters, and then always with tinfoil, and then another covering of tinfoil, and then 4 more coverings of tinfoil, and masking tape, which I recently saw for sale as chametz sealing tape. That's what they called it, and it literally was just masking tape for $7. We, the Jewish people, can make money on a lot of things. Anyway, welcome, and I'm so happy that I have a topic to talk about tonight, and one that is not in the least controversial, at least to our people. So we'll have some fun with Passover in just a few moments. And remember, next week there's no service because Thursday night, we have Wednesday night, we have Thursday night is our Seder, but on and on. I'm going to go visit my kids on the quickest trip possible during the intermediary days. So we will be back on the following week, and Mike Whitty is going to speak. He's going to talk about aging into saging, and that's on the 10th. And then on the 17th, we're going to have a very special guest. She's a new member of our congregation, Molly Reeser. She runs this camp that we were advertising through all of the literature we were asking for materials. It's a horse camp, and it's called Camp Casey, and she's going to come talk all about Camp Casey, and I hear she's bringing a few stallions with her, so that should be nice. They may need the room where the piano is, though, so there you go. I actually think that's a piece of classical music, not actually with you may know of it, the classical music, the William Tell Overture, I think it's called.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I hate to teach you about music because I don't know anything about music, but but I know that.
Good for you.
All right, we're going to begin with the first slide now. The art there was supposed to indicate Passover, as you can see, the 4 matzahs, the 4 cups, etc. Light. Light has long been our people's symbol of hope and renewal, a reminder that even in darkness we hold the power to bring light into our lives and the world. We welcome Shabbat with light, filling our homes and communities with warmth, peace, and a sense of purpose. May the glow of our Shabbat candles remind us of the strength we carry within and the responsibilities we share with one another. May their light bring to our hearts, joy to our hearts, and clarity to our minds. As the flames rise, may they inspire us to act with courage, compassion, and urgency, bringing light to those who need it most. Our readers tonight are Suzanne Paul, Rick Grauer, Charles Paul, Linda Congale, and Giddy West. And I'm going to invite Linda and Alan to please come forward to light our candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor ba'shabbat.
To enter this space on Shabbat is to enter a place free from the demands of our everyday lives. We step away from our daily routines in an attempt to gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. At other times, in other places, we may feel fragile and alone. Yet here we join together to find strength, to build community as we look with wonder at the universe and seek our place within its vastness. To this place we come to lengthen our perspective.
To this place we come to question and explore.
In this place we awaken our imaginations.
In this place we draw strength as we allow ourselves to dream.
Together we share the challenge of an ever-changing world, a world often beyond our control. Together we seek to find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose. Together we share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Together we bond as a community, a true gift of Shabbat.
Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. Lai 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 lai. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. Lai 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 lai. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom. Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather in that spirit, even as we imagine Shabbat anew. May we too find rest from the day's work and refuge from our cares. May we too feel the warmth of love and companionship. May we too feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive.
May we be blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with the Shabbat light. Maya ve'ayom Shabbat Shalom. Maya ve'ayom Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
We say what we believe what we say. As humanistic Jews, we do not plead for supernatural intervention to bring healing to those who are ill or injured. We seek to be present for them in the hope that this will contribute to their recovery. We do not ask that our dead find protection under divine wings of mercy. We acknowledge that the dead are gone and that caring for their survivors is what now matters. We do not look to the heavens to send us peace. We recognize that an exclusively human responsibility. We use our communal rituals and celebrations to empower ourselves. By gathering to affirm what we believe about the nature of reality and the responsibilities of humanity, we are strengthened. For the humanistic Jewish believer, this is the essence of what some call the religious experience. Surrounded by a like-minded community, we are liberated to say what we really believe. Then, strengthened by each other, we can better manifest our beliefs in the world each and every day.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה שומר כבר העולם. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
On Shabbat, we pause to reflect. Where is my light, the light that carries me forward, that brightens my path, even in uncertain times? It is here within me.
And with all of us together. Where is my hope, the hope that sustains me, that reminds me tomorrow can be better, that we can build a world of justice and kindness? It is here within me.
And within all of us together. Where is my strength, the strength to stand firm in my values, to face difficulties with courage, to reach out a hand to another? It is here within me.
And within all of us together. As we welcome Shabbat, let us embrace this truth. We are not alone. The light, the hope, and the strength we seek are not distant. They are already here within us, waiting to be recognized, nurtured, and shared.
Efori oribi, efo tikvati, tikvati bi, efo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bak, kochi, kochi bi, vegam bak. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
Peace is more than the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice, compassion, and hope. It does not arrive on its own. It must be nurtured through the strength to stand firm in our convictions and the willingness to seek understanding. True peace begins within. It calls us to care for ourselves and our communities, to ensure that we are grounded and secure. But it cannot remain there. Peace reaches outward, finding life in the connections we build and the shared commitment to a world where dignity and fairness prevail. Peace is not passive. It grows from the small acts of courage and kindness that sustain us and the choices we make, even when the path is uncertain. It asks us to see humanity in one another and to believe that even in difficult times, we can shape a better future. May we pursue peace with purpose, bringing light to our lives and to the world we share.
Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam Shalom, Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam, Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom.
In this community, where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these beloved members of our community, to Lee Bricker, Susan Lipson, and Jim Walker. And to that list, if you have someone you're thinking about, please. Anybody else? Yes. Anybody on this side, Linda?
Jan Brasner and Linda Foka.
Thank you. Did we miss anyone? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly, and may they experience a complete recovery of refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Makom ha'koach b'tochenu, Mekorot ha'bracha mivrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Makom ha'koach b'tochenu, Mekorot ha'bracha mivrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
When I'm struggling with the fear of my own death, or with grief over the death of someone I love, what comforts me most isn't philosophies or ideas. It's the presence of someone who loves me, just sitting with me silently, letting me feel what I have to feel, not trying to fix it or make it go away, but simply being with me while I feel it. It's the presence of someone who loves me, letting me know that I'm not alone, and by their presence, being part of the foundation I can come back to when the feelings pass. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. As tonight, we observe the yard sites of these beloved members of our community and of their loved ones. Of Dorothy Grauer, Eugene Kahn, Esther Luria, Albert Paul, Harold Schiff, Leon Williams, Gerald Young, and Irene Young. If there are people whom you're remembering tonight as we enter this moment, please feel free to share their names. Anybody? If you can do so comfortably, please rise as we together recite our humanistic version of the Kaddish, remembering them with loving hearts. Yehi zichram livracha. Nit gadal v'nit kadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. Well, that's just going to be for decoration mostly. The oneg tonight, I should mention, the oneg tonight is sponsored in memory of Eugene Kahn, the father of Linda Kahn Gale and Alan Gale. Thank you for sponsoring it in his honor and his memory. This little ritual of taking off my watch, my son-in-law told me a little joke. My new son-in-law told me a little joke. They're asking the rabbi, so what does that mean? And he says, absolutely nothing. But it will help me at least get us to the oneg. People always see my sermons and they get very scared. But it's only because my eyes are so bad, so it's very, very big font. But we actually do have a lot to talk about tonight, and it's something I haven't done in a Friday night. I've done bits and pieces of this with classes, special events, and so forth. But we're going to have a pretty extensive look at this holiday. It is my favorite. I know probably for some of you it is the same. But do we really know that much about it? I was talking with Alan a little bit before services, and he actually recalled some of the earlier pieces of the holiday that I'm going to be talking about first, because this is a layered holiday. Starts out as an agricultural holiday. It becomes a national narrative. It goes on to be reconstructed almost entirely, at least in its observance, by our rabbis, and then to have meaning for generations, millennia afterward, including meanings that are inspired by our own specific philosophies like humanistic Judaism and wider shared philosophies that we all have as Jews. So we're going to ask tonight, where the heck did it come from? How did separate observances, as you're going to learn for a moment, and these separate ideas become one? What's historical? What's literary? And why has it endured for so long? So I want to start with a primary source, the Bible, of course. And this is one of the oldest mentions of Passover. So it takes place in the book of Leviticus, and the Lord is speaking to Moses and telling him to tell the Israelites, these are my festivals, these are the appointed festivals of Yahweh the Lord, which you are to proclaim. Goes on to talk about the Sabbath, the Shabbat at first, and so forth. And then it says this, the Passover, the Pesach, and the festival of Matzot, the unleavened bread. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, sacred assemblies you should proclaim. These holidays, the Lord's Passover, Yahweh's Passover, his Pesach, begins at twilight on the 14th of the first month. And just a reminder, we're in the first month. And if you forgot why, it's because Rosh Hashanah is a birthday of the world. And birthdays just take place in whatever month they happen to be in. But in the ancient calendar, and ours is primarily drawn from Babylon, this was the first month. It's not the 7th month, even though it feels like the 7th month. So it goes on to say that that happens on the 14th day, but on the 15th day of that month is Yahweh's festival of Matzot, the Chag, the festival of Matzot. And for 7 days you must eat that matzot without yeast, that unleavened bread. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and don't do any regular work. For the 7 days, present a food offering to Yahweh, and on the 7th day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. And then it goes on to talk about the holiday of the first fruits, which is coming up afterwards, and it doesn't say one darn word about what? The Exodus. Not one word. This is an old source, and this old source is reminding us of a couple of things. One, that this is actually a holiday that precedes its joining with the Exodus story, and that it's not just a holiday, it's 2 holidays. One, Pesach on the 14th day of Nisan, the month we're in now, and the second one starts immediately after, called Chag HaMatzot on the 15th day of Nisan. One is a single-day sacrificial event, the Pasach, the sacrificial offering. In fact, there's a name for it in English, the Paschal offering, which obviously comes from the word Pasach. The other is a multi-day agricultural festival. Why are they together? Well, let's start with their agricultural origins. They really did start as 2. The Pasach, or Pesach, associated with animal sacrifice. Its likely original meaning had to do with the springtime pastoral setting that they were living in, the birth of livestock. Possibly the connection to Pasach is not that Yahweh passed over, we even translated our holiday that way, or the angel of death passed over, or Yahweh passed over the people and protected them from the angel of death. No, it actually might be an older Hebraic word related to the word skipping or dancing. Because, and this is the implication, it's a time of renewal. And they're dancing and joyful in the arrival of the new grain cycle, of the young ewes that they're going to sacrifice and other animals. And then there's the Chag HaMatzot, the festival of unleavened bread. That one is obviously about the grain cycle. Its likely origin was that it was a wheat harvest festival. Possibly it dealt with getting rid of your old stores, much of which would have leavened and probably spoiled. Arthur, would you mind? Well, actually, it shouldn't be Arthur. Greg, do you mind letting them know? Or Arthur, sit, because we're going to need you. Yeah. And that's probably what they were doing, and then offering up to the priests at the high places the first grain. In any case, none of this has anything to do with the Exodus narrative. At some point, these 2 holidays came together and combined into a single holiday, and that's where we get this holiday that we're about to celebrate, but it doesn't tell us a darn thing about how it came to be associated with Passover. And I might not fully answer that question tonight, because what I'm going to tell you about is how the story came together, and my theory is that just like other holidays, Passover was assigned to this holiday. And I think that Pesach name, which suggests passing over, might have actually had something to do with that. All right, let's talk about the core elements, though, of our story. What are we celebrating? What are we talking about? We're talking about Israelite enslavement in Egypt, the divine plagues, death of the firstborn being the last. We're talking about the marking up with the hyssop and the blood of the Israelite home so that angel of death doesn't hit us when he's hitting the others. We're talking about the unleavened bread, and now it's not about celebrating the new harvest. It's about hastily leaving the land of Egypt, eager for our freedom. We get to the sea, we have our adventure there, we enter the wilderness, we have a lot of adventures there, and finally we go to the promised land. Moses, unfortunately, does not have that opportunity. These holidays were clearly repurposed to get all that in. But that is a lot that's very important to us because it's our foundational story. It tells us who we are as a people, talks about our liberation, and it speaks to our identity as Jews. Now, when do we begin to see the association with the story? Well, it happens already in the Torah. Now, this is different than, for instance, the next holiday, Shavuot. Shavuot is associated with the giving of the Ten Commandments, the Torah at Mount Sinai, but in fact, the Bible doesn't say that at all. It's not in the Torah. But this is in the Torah. And that suggests a very, very ancient joining of these holidays. And so what happens there in the Passover instructions that are so different than the ones in Leviticus? In Exodus, Yahweh says to Moses and Aaron, while they're still in Egypt, this month for you, the first month, reminder again, this is the first month of the year, tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household, and it goes on into how you're going to collect these up. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, and then, when all the members come together at twilight, slaughter them. And then it talks about what they're going to experience, which is putting the blood on the lintels of the house to protect themselves. And then that same night, eat that meat, roasted over fire with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. So they insert that. We already have these traditions have all come together at this point. And this is some 2,700 years ago, the time easily that these stories now begin to enter our consciousness as Israelites and Jews. It even tells them how to eat it, with their cloak tucked into their belt, in other words, ready to go, sandals on your feet, staff in your hand, eat it in haste. And that is supposed to be the tradition for time to come, even though it continues with saying, on that night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and angels, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. The blood will be a sign for you, etc. Goes on to say, this is a day you should commemorate. So you're going to do the same thing over and over again, probably without the blood, but they may have used it at the beginning, we don't know. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahweh, a lasting ordinance. And then it shows the combination again. You are to eat bread made without yeast, the matzahs. On the first day, remove the yeast from your house, etc. And they still have the tradition of burning the chametz, searching for it the night before. And the little ritual thing with a feather and a candle, if you've ever seen that ceremony. I used to do it with my kids. And my grandkids still do it with my kids. And then to burn it ritually the next day. So it talks about, again, the 7 days and everything. But it connects it very carefully to the Exodus. You can celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, the Chag HaMatzot, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt, your multitudes out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting day for generations to come. It goes on to say, eat unleavened bread during those 7 days. Keep that matzahs around. And on that day, tell your son, it says son, but child as we interpret it, I do this because of what Yahweh did for me when I came out of Egypt. So now we have a remembrance of the telling of this story. Nothing specific, but explain what we're doing, why. It goes on to say, in days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand, Yahweh brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, Yahweh killed the firstborn of both people and animals in Egypt, and so forth. So here we begin to see, this is not the origin of the Seder, but it is a remembrance of sharing the story and keeping it going from generation to generation. But the story is so problematic, right? Did this happen? I've had humanistic Jews actually become upset. Humanistic Jews, when I tell them this is a work of total fiction. Now, it might have some elements, and I'll talk about a few of them that represent something really having to do with this, that, or the other, but this is a work of fiction. This is not a story that happened, at least certainly not in that way. And this is the story of the Jewish people. This is our foundational story. Do we have another? Well, as it turns out, we do. It's pretty recent. And surprisingly, it does connect to parts of this. I say surprisingly because we never expect archaeology to do any confirmation for us. The first biblical, so-called biblical archaeologists, they don't call themselves that anymore, they went in there with what they called the Bible and a spade in one hand, and the Bible in one hand, the spade in the other hand, and they're going to dig up the truth, and they found that there was no archaeological evidence for the story as it occurred. Certainly nothing for about a large-scale Israelite slavery in Egypt, mass exodus, and don't even get me started on the things that didn't happen. The angel of death, that's a midrash. That's a creative story later. The pyramids, they had already been there 1,000 years at the time that this is supposed to have taken place and at the time of the formation of the Jewish people or the Israelite people. And I'll use those interchangeably, but the correct when it's really to call them proto-Israelites, but that's a mouthful for a talk like this. Here's a good example. One of the first places these biblical archaeologists went was into Jericho. Why not? That's the first place where the story comes to its end. That's where Joshua leads the Israelites into the promised land, takes down the walls, the whole story. And, well, archaeological indications there show that there were destructions. The walls did come a-tumbling down, but not then. Other times, and we know. There was no fortified city at the traditional time that the conquest supposedly took place. It was likely uninhabited. This is just one problem they started to run into when they did this. So how does a liberation story that ends with the triumphant return, if you will, because the story speaks about them having gone from there into Egypt, how does that, without evidence, come into being? Well, here's where we're going to talk about some of the elements of the story, none of them in the plot line, but pieces of what is, well, involved, shall we say, that we begin to see have maybe some relationship. Let's talk about Egypt and its role in the ancient Near East. So here's our time frame, and this is when, for a variety of reasons, both the Torah and archaeologists, as I'll show you in a few moments, believe that there was something interesting that happened in the growth of the population in parts of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and it was in the basically 13th to 12th century, which more or less aligns with where the story seems to take place in the Bible. So that's a little touch point. We call that the Late Bronze Age. Now, what was Egypt like in the Late Bronze Age? Were they hosting hordes of Israelite slaves? No. But they were a regional power, a superpower, if you will. They were indeed the dominant political and military force throughout the entire region. That included Canaan, Eretz Israel. That included Sinai, for that matter. They controlled everything, but not directly. They controlled it through vassal kings. And it's thanks to those vassal kings and the treasury of letters, tablets that we found going back and forth from Egypt to Canaan and other areas that informed us of the sheer size of Egyptian influence in the 14th century and earlier. This was the first kingdom, the amazingly large kingdom. This collection of letters, it's an archive on clay tablets, was a correspondence between the Egyptian rulers and his vassal kings, wherever they might have lived, working out all kinds of diplomatic solutions, talking about military matters, threatening, discussing what the tributes will be, etc. What's important to remember is that this illustrates Canaan and that whole region as being under ultimate Egyptian control. Not direct Egyptian control, but ultimate Egyptian control. The local rulers were, at the end of the day, answerable to Egypt. Not that he was forcing them to do this, that, or the other. He wanted their stuff. He wanted their tribute, and he wanted the control. This, of course, creates some pretty heavy historical tension. Because if Egypt controls Canaan, then migration from Egypt to Canaan, which is what we supposedly did, right, our ancestors, is not really an escape to freedom. You're still going to be under Pharaoh, right? So in addition to all the evidence that's lacking, even the historical reality there speaks to something else. Couldn't have been running from Egypt to basically a place under Egyptian control. That doesn't make any sense. Well then, where do we come from? Where do the Israelites come from? Well, it turns out we're Canaanites. We are Canaanites, just like the Bible says. But we're not Canaanites who went into Egypt. And we're not Canaanites who came out of Egypt to a brand new land. There was migration going on everywhere. The peoples of that region were multiracial. They had all different kinds of backgrounds. And when you went to a new place, you adopted their gods. You married into their families. That's just how it was. It seems like we didn't have mixing back then, but in that part of the world, we had a lot of mixing. That might have suggested the Abraham and Sarah migration story, for instance. Maybe there were ancestors they were remembering who came from Mesopotamia. It's not at all unlikely. People were going back and forth from Mesopotamia, Iraq, Babylon, that area, to Canaan and other places all the time. Israel was very important back then strategically. Today it's only important religiously. Doesn't really have a lot of strategic Straits of Hormuz kind of usage to it. But back then, that was the Straits on land. You got a whole Africa over here, you got a whole Near East over there, and you want to get to it, you got to go through Israel. That's why it was important to the pharaohs. As it turns out, though, something population-related did happen at the time that the conquest is described as having happened. So what could it have been? If it wasn't Israelite slaves escaping, for all the reasons I've told you, what was going on? Well, believe it or not, we think we know. Israel Finkelstein, a very famous Israeli archaeologist, did a survey of the Israelite highlands. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. If you could turn the slide, Arthur. No? Okay. Picture Israel in your mind. Why don't you do Control Q and then you can reboot it, but I'll keep talking. All right. Now, pull down the mirror thing. One day this is going to work. I don't know what the heck is going on, but it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out later. Just, did we get it back? All right. Swipe through it. Can you do that? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there we go. Here's Israel, right? This is Jordan. This is the mountains of Moab over here. This is the central part of Israel. You see these mountains here? They're not that big. They're more hills. But this is a very, very important area because this was not a highly populated, densely populated area of Israel until approximately the 13th century. People lived all over the place, but mostly they lived in the plains and on the area of the Shfela, the coastal areas and so forth. That's where you could farm much easier. It wasn't rugged. We came from here, all up and down. That's where the important religious cities are, from Jerusalem all the way, and also, by the way, going all the way south to Hebron, which is where Abraham was said to have settled. So Israel Finkelstein went there, and he searched around there, and he did this extensive archaeological survey, and others joined him, and it took quite a long time, and they discovered this. From the 13th to the 11th centuries BC, sometime in there was rapid population growth. Rapid. Could not have been natural growth. Not to say there weren't people living up there, but they were very, very sparse. This was a lot of people, and it suggests migration. But when we look at the nature of the population, its origins are not Egyptian. Now, if the Israelites had been living in Egypt for 400 years and arrived and settled the Canaanite highlands, the Israelite highlands, wouldn't their stuff have looked Egyptian? Their stuff looked Canaanite. But it didn't look like the good Canaanite stuff. It looked like the cheap Canaanite stuff. The stuff poor people would have made that looked just like it, but was, their stuff. Because they were dealing with clay and things. They didn't have all the nice stuff that the rich people in the cities did. The pottery, material remains, as we call them, is one of the best examples. It tells us that whoever it was that moved there had Canaanite culture, and it was continuous, definitely not Egyptian, and that leads us to believe this was not a population that had set foot in Egypt. So what happened? Why did all these people move there? Well, this is actually something that's been explored a great deal, and not necessarily only by Jewish people. There's a great book, and I'm going to forget the name of it. I think it's just called 1187 or 1167. I can't believe I forgot the name of the book. But if you're interested in it, I'll get it for you. It's about what happened there. And what happened there was really incredible. There was a complete upheaval from Egypt all the way east and north that took place over about 150 years. What happened there? Climate change. They had climate change. They had social breakdown. As a result of that, an earthquake suddenly happened, which might have contributed to the climate change. It does warm waters. They had the decline of major powers because of revolts that were spurred by this upheaval. And it went on for a long time. Egypt was never the same again. It went from being unbelievably powerful to just kind of powerful. And other enormous kingdoms and empires began to rise after this, many of which we read about in the Bible, and they're substantiated by real life. This meant that suddenly there was an ability to maybe leave the places where you were working for the vassal king. That guy needed a lot of money, a lot of stuff, and a lot of it he sent to Egypt. You can imagine there might have been some resentment. People sometimes call this, scholars do, the peasant uprising version. They who came up with that did not know about all these other upheavals. That took a whole lot longer, and it's only been in the last 30, 40 years that we knew about some of what was happening. Eric Klein wrote that book, C-L-I-N-E, if you're looking for it. This leads us to believe that many of the lower classes, the perhaps serf classes as we might call them, it's a little anachronistic, that they were the ones who led these crumbling cities, took advantage of that, maybe even engaged in uprisings, and flocked to new places in the highlands where they began as clans and maybe even tribal arrangements ultimately to develop their own society. It was very much a throwback. Civilization was in place, but they were now taking on these new pastoral and agricultural roles, because that's how you have to live up there, probably joining with others who might have gone before them, maybe even people they knew, we don't know. We don't know when they started calling themselves Israelites exactly, but we do know that the word Israel, and it's done in a transcribed way that indicates Israel, is first mentioned in 1208 BCE. We know exactly when it was, because it's on a stela that's sitting in Cairo to this day. No, it's not in Cairo. Where is it?
No, there is a stela, but it says only Israel. It's not the whole word, so they assume it.
I'm talking about the Merneptah stela. I believe that is in Cairo, but we'll look it up afterwards. Okay, so the Merneptah stele basically says that Pharaoh went and conquered Israel, and it's a people, There's a way of denoting that in the hieroglyphics. I don't know hieroglyphics, but I am told. And it's the people of Israel, and that they've been completely wiped out and destroyed. But this was very common for the pharaohs. They basically, anybody they didn't like, they said they completely destroyed them. Sort of like Trump, you know. I completely did this and I completely did that. Well, he's modeled on some of these people, or he models himself on some of this. Not a political statement, it's just how he talks. They exaggerated too. A people, not a land. So this at least tells us one thing. Whatever was going on over there in Canaan, people knew about this group known as Yisrael as early as 1208 BCE. That's something, the end of the 13th century. It confirms that Israelite identity existed, but it also has that other flip side of completely disconfirming the Exodus narrative. So instead, we know maybe where we came from, but it's not the whole story. Nor does it erase the idea, the notion, that there was a liberation story waiting to be told. Now, part of that may have been, according to J. David Sperling, a professor at Hebrew Union College, wrote this book all about it. He says that the Passover may have been a little bit of an allegory for, well, we were slaves to the Egyptian empire, and now we're not. And that may be partially true. But there may have also been other pieces to it. Shortly, we'll see that there was a liberation narrative that had nothing to do with the kings, because we already know that story, but it takes us a little closer to Egypt. And so I'm going to tell you that story now. So let's leave these guys behind for a moment. Let's leave Israel behind. And I also want to throw this in, because I forgot to put it in my notes. We all grew up on the Jacob story, that he wrestled with a man, an angel, whatever it was. And because he wrestled with it, he struggled with this angel, he was then given a new name. What is Jacob's new name? Israel. And it's one who struggles with God, El. Except that's not what it means. Yisrael doesn't mean that. Yisrael is related to the word Sar in ancient Canaanite and in Hebrew, which means a ruler or prince, something like that. Yisrael means one that is ruled by the god El. And El is a very important god on the old, and much older than this story, the old pantheon of the Canaanite areas. There were different manifestations of El. We still say God is El. We use it the plural now because all the manifestations were combined into Elohim. But El and Elohim are always used with the singular verb, so it's one thing, even if it's got the im ending, which is like an S at the end of an English word. But where the hell did Yahweh come from? Yahweh's not on that pantheon. Yahweh's not a character on anybody's list of gods in Israel, the Central Highlands, any of that area, Lebanon, Syria, none of those places. Yahweh's not there. It's always El, also Baal. But El's big. There's El Elyon, there's El this, there's El that, but they're all manifestations of El. But there was a Yahweh. There's a Yahweh elsewhere. There's a Yahweh down further south, and I don't mean down here. I mean even further south. It starts here, but further south over here. Possibly as close as Egypt, the Sinai area, where Midian was. Midian is a very famous nation in the Bible. It's a southern nation, a desert nation, much different than the highlands of Israel. Oh, what happened? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just close it up. We don't worry about it. Arthur. He's just going to play with that. It's fine. Forget about it. It's good. Okay. Let's go south. Let's go south, y'all. Let's go south and meet our southern ancestors, because the ones that were living in the highlands were not the only ones. Yahweh is found on a different pantheon, not even a pantheon, in a different place. And we learn about it because of, oh, okay, there we are again. Because this Edom, Midian, Sinai area housed, well, as long as you're doing it, go ahead, because that was the only other slide I wanted to show, so we'll relive our service. We're going to find out what's going on with this. Okay, there it is. Oh, go back, there it is. We find the mention of Yahweh on an inscription in the Soleb temple from the 14th century BCE, and it's not talking about the Israelites. It mentions a group of people called the Shasu, who are probably not any kind of ethnic group. They were probably a collection of different kinds of groups. But these Shasu, who lived in that area, that southern area that I was vamping a little, to see if we get this picture back up, and this people here worshipped a god named Yahweh. It's actually Yahoo, but I'm not going to get too specific. The hey was silent, the vav is also an u. It's the same guy. It's the same guy. It's our best mention of Yahweh and our most ancient mention of Yahweh, and it's not Israelite. It's from the Shasu. It basically says, after he names a ring of his defeated enemies, the land of the Shasu, who are basically nomads of Yahweh. They are a people or a group of people who were associated with Yahweh. So how does Yahweh, who is actually a fictional person, a fictional god, how does Yahweh move north to the Jews, to the Israelites? Remember, Jews is anachronistic, but I sometimes say it. Well, in the Torah, we know something about the Midianites. Sometimes they're enemies, but quite frequently, and particularly in the Moses story, there are some prominent Midianites. One of them is his wife, and the other would be her dad. And he sojourned with them, as we may say in biblical talk. Because after he needed to flee Egypt, having killed the overseer that was beaten up on the Israelite slave, where does Moses go? Down to Midian. He travels down to their area and encounters what in the story is described as a new or novel religious environment. But probably this is the origin story of the characters. Not necessarily the entirety of the story, but of the characters in the Torah. Specifically, Moses, whose name is Egyptian. Think about Ramesses, Moses. It means son of Ra'am. Moses is son of who we don't know. Son of none. Son of no one. But his sister Miriam has an Egyptian name. His brother Aaron has an Egyptian name. The prominent Levitical priest Pinchas has an additional name, and a Hebrew name, Egyptian name, and I could go on and on and on and on. And Yahweh is a God of liberation. Now, not to the Shasu. They didn't write anything. But when we see Yahweh spoken of in other parts of the Bible, it's often as a God who blows in from the south, a God of war, and a God of liberation. We don't know who these people really were. But the fact that Yahweh enters the conversation tells us that someone, a group of people perhaps, whose names were Moses, Aaron, Miriam, we don't know, but certainly that's an odd group of names to suddenly appear in Canaan. And it's an odd God to suddenly appear in Canaan, and yet there he is. Suddenly, this God, Yahweh, becomes, well, not suddenly, slowly, let's say, but suddenly for us, becomes associated with El. I have a theory. It's not just my theory, but I actually came up with it independently and then heard that other people had thought of it too. That the Shema is a reminder of this. You know, Shema is hard to translate. Hear, O Israel, that part's easy, right? Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Yahweh, Adonai, is our El, is our Elohim. Yahweh is our Elohim. Yahweh is El. Yahweh and El are one. And suddenly it makes sense. Yahweh and El are the same guy. How could that have happened? Well, the theory is, and it's a good one, and I think it's powerful, a lot of textual evidence, we've got archaeological evidence, and then we just have to provide conjecture, but it's not all the way out in left field. It might be much closer in. Might still be in the outfield, I don't know. But the one thing that we can say is that Yahweh became our God, and that's his proper name. And there's a lot of other evidence in the Torah, too, that we didn't maybe know him as that. In fact, Moses has a little story. Your people did not know me as Yahweh. Isn't that what he's told when he asks Yahweh of his name at the burning bush? They did not know me as Yahweh. Well, they did. All the stories have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob talking to Yahweh all the time. How you doing, Yahweh? I'm doing okay. How you doing? It's all over the place. So where did this come from? Whoever wrote that needed to explain why the Israelites didn't know who Yahweh was. That was what was important, and that Moses brought it to them. So we have these Egyptian ideas, and on top of that too, every one of these characters is a Levite. Now, what is a Levite? Levite's the priestly tribe, right? Now, we're used to thinking that only one specific line, the Aaron line, took up the priesthood, and everybody else just had to be singers and assistants, but they were still priests of a kind. They were priestly, shall we say. But in truth, the word Levi comes from the word lelavot, lava, to accompany, to join up with. What better name for a group of people who are from the outside, from the south, bringing whatever liberation story they had and telling the story of this magnificent God, Yahweh, introducing Yahweh to the El worshipers who say, indeed, we were liberated from Egypt. We never lived there, but we were liberated nonetheless. We remember that we came forth from Egypt's yoke and came into these hills of Israel and became a people, a great people. And the ones from the south say, yes, the same one who liberated us, Yahweh. And the other ones look at them and say, no, his name is El. No, his name is Yahweh. And perhaps at one point they had a meeting and decided, it's Yahweh Elohim, Adonai Eloheinu. It's an exact translation. And that's where we think this came from, that these two gods became one. Our story of the Exodus can't possibly be true. It's filled with miracles. But over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years, how much does it really take to change a little story here, a little story there? We have other versions of this story in the Bible. There are passages in the Bible that refer to the Exodus and leave out some plagues or have them in a different order or have plagues that weren't part of it. I don't remember if that's true or not, but you look it up. There are different versions of the story that might represent, certainly represent part of the evolution of the story as we're going along. So that shows us how we get to Passover, how we get to our actual origins, and how we get to the two gods that became one, and then later, fanatically almost, this insistence that they were not just one, but that they were the only ones. That, by the way, happens later. The Torah is not a monotheistic document. The Torah is a polytheistic document with a very, very big God sitting at the top, so powerful that he dwarfs the others, who ultimately just fell away. And by the time we get to 2,500 years ago, it's one God and one God only. He has a mysterious name, and he has another way of calling him, just El, which becomes generic for God. And then from there, it just sort of becomes other things. And we have other names for God, the merciful one, this one, that one, and the other one. They're all ways of speaking about God. We were slaves, though. The fact that we talk about we were slaves is so important because clearly they all felt a sense of liberation. They focused on freedom. And that's where we go to next in our exploration of this holiday. At some point, we don't know why, Pesach, the first holiday with the lamb, and Chag HaMatzot also slapped together. That makes more sense. That's easier to understand. One is coming on the heels of the other, so clearly they're one kind of continuous holiday. And now it carries not just seasonal meaning, not just theological meaning, but also historical meaning. It is our identification story, our identity story, our what do they call it, origin story. This is our tale. And we don't know how it was observed all those years, other than the Paschal sacrifice, which was a popular sacrifice. Everybody made it. It wasn't something you gave to the priest to do. but also they made it in the temple. And then, of course, what happened at some point, however it was, they were telling the story every year. Maybe they were doing it with their coat, with their cloak tucked into their belt, who knows? Maybe they were putting blood up, we don't know. But at some point it changed. And that point we can see. It was with the destruction of the Second Temple. Whatever else was exactly going on before that is a matter of real conjecture, because we don't have a lot said or written about it, other than everything I've told you here. But this we know about. And without the temple, which is the entire scaffolding of sacrifices and all holidays, this is a pilgrimage holiday, after all. The rabbis were forced to rebuild Judaism, actually to build what we now call rabbinical Judaism. And it took a few hundred years. But one of the first things that they worked on was the establishment of a new way, a novel way, of celebrating the holiday. And that's the way we do it today. And it took a while. It took a while to sew what we use today out of all of their comments and suggestions for how it should be observed, in order to get them from sacrifice to story, from temple to your house, to your home's dinner table, and from the priest being in charge of all this kind of thing to the family taking it over. They invented the Seder. It is a very, very cool ceremony. Most people don't realize that all that reclining business, which they don't do anyway. I remember my grandfather, he got the chair with the arms so we could put a pillow in. And you know, at some point he would just sort of nod it off to the side because he wasn't so young anymore. He was probably younger than me. But that was the only guy who reclined at our Seder. Why do we recline at Seders? Let's see if you've read my Haggadah. Anybody remember? It's based on a Roman symposium. The Roman symposium. That's what the rich Romans did. They lounged on these couches all night and told stories and had entertainments and sang songs. It was a very big deal. And only the leisure class could do that. Everybody else was the servant or working somewhere. But the rabbis wanted the Jews on their night of freedom to be the leisure class. And so that's the reason for reclining. What else do we get there? Well, we get the multiple cups of wine. We get this discussion. We get the questions and answers. From centralized temple, we move to decentralized home. From the priestly class, every one of us can do this. Anybody who can read can conduct a Seder. It becomes a ritual over time based upon the Mishnah, the earliest compilation of rabbinical law, the Talmud, and then simply the traditions, all of this entering the writing of the Haggadah. It's really a weird text if you think about it. We are all very used to these modern Haggadahs now that kind of make it easier for us. But you remember the Maxwell house? Well, Rabbi Maxwell didn't invent that. And in Israel, they give you these traditional Haggadahs come out in the newspaper. Do they still do that? I don't know. But they used to have reprints in the newspaper every year. So if you didn't have one around the house, at least you got one in the paper before the holidays started. These are just traditional Haggadahs, but they don't just tell the story. As windy as my story is, it's much more windy. There's interruptions constantly. Oh yeah, while we're thinking about it, let's talk about how those plagues came out. Oh hey, this rabbi got up in the morning and said this. Oh, hey, did we mention we got to ask some questions? Let's do that. And let's do it at the beginning before anybody even knows that we're supposed to be asking about these things. And all that kind of stuff. It's really weird. The telling of the story, it's all midrash. It's how the midrash operates. And reading it year in and year out, you sort of get there. It does encourage questions like, what the hell does this thing say? That's a big question. The translations were always terrible, but I don't think that's what the rabbis wanted in mind. It introduced new ways of thinking about things. One of my favorite of all the passages is when we get to the matzah, when we just lift it up and we show everybody the matzah at the beginning and we say, halach ma'anya. That's not even Hebrew, that's Aramaic. That's supposed to be something everyone can understand. It's like if we say it in English, which we should. This is the bread of affliction, halach ma'anya, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who need who are in need, come and join us in the celebration of Pesach. This year we are here. Next year we may be in the land of Israel. This year we are slaves. Next year may we be free. So what is the matzah now? It's not agricultural anymore. It is still about the story, but look what they've done. They make it about something even newer, about reminding us of humility and our humble origins, and that people are hungry, and that we need to open up our world to everybody, our homes to everybody. Let all who are hungry come and eat. The memory of suffering combined with an ethical responsibility. They've still got that central command to tell the story. When they said, tell your son this, there's 3 other places where it tells you how to tell your son the story. And out of that, they got the story of the 4 sons. The wise, the wicked, the one who doesn't know how to ask, the one who's simple. Because they looked at the way it was framed, and they said, well, that's where he must have been talking to that one, and he must have been talking to that one. And then later, they developed it into a whole other line of thinking. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. It allows that kind of creativity. The Manishtana, why is it at the beginning? It's at the beginning because it used to be at the end when the children were already disinterested. So they put it back at the beginning where now, look for the following things, they said to the kids. And by the way, they used to put out little candies and all kinds of things, little nuts and so forth for the kids, so they wouldn't get so hungry and antsy during the Seder. And we do it too. We put out those little plague toys. I had some issues with that, and Anne Maria's talked me out of them. But little plague toys, all these little kind of tchotchkes that we put on our Seder table, that goes way back. And these questions do prompt discussion, even if nobody knows why we're asking about reclining, because nobody's reclining anymore. My suggestion is everybody should recline. Get a big couch, a big banquette, and we'll just all lean on each other for the Seder. There are so many new insights that are in it. We start the story with Arami Oved Avi. My ancestor, my father, was a wandering Aramean. We don't even know that that's what that means. And yet we want to go all the way back with our identity story and that element of it as well. This goes on and on throughout the Seder. But what to me is so important is that the symbols stay the same. The symbols stay the same. We have the shank bone reminding us of the time when we did make sacrifice. The bitter herbs, which are mentioned in the Torah. Eat bitter things to remind you what a terrible experience this was. The matzah, indeed a bread of affliction. Remember that, and remember how some people, that's all they can afford, and you can bring them into your house. From physical sacrifice, we get to symbolic reenactment. We've got 4 of many things, including the 4 cups of wine. There was a 5th cup. There was a 5th cup, the cup of future liberation. What did we do with that 5th cup? It's the cup of Elijah, because Elijah represents that liberation. Because he'll come back someday in the myth. He'll come back and he'll announce that Mashiach is nigh, Mashiach will be coming. And whether you believe in Mashiach or not, you still know that Elijah is a representation of a better future, and he's in there. We personalize it in every generation. Every Jew should see him or herself as having gone out of Egypt. All of this is in the Haggadah. It goes from the particular, our story, to the universal, let all who are hungry come and eat. The memory of slavery, the empathy that it should create, and it succeeded. It's why it is, to this day, more popular than any other holiday. The #1 holiday in the Jewish world. Why? It's portable. Not only do you not need a temple, you don't need a synagogue. It's adaptable. It changes all the time. There are literally hundreds of thousands of Haggadahs. I don't just mean with different pictures, same text. I mean with all kinds of new ways of thinking about things. The Reform movement alone is published by probably 5, just as an official movement. And if you put in all the ones created by their rabbis, it's probably 5,000. And that might have only been like last year. Everybody's written a Haggadah. I wrote a Haggadah. I wrote 2 Haggadahs. There's a lot of Haggadahs. It's easy to transmit. It's really beautiful at the family. It's a living document. And for us, it's a reminder that Judaism always evolves. What went from an ancient Highlander holiday, a holiday of new livestock and new wheat, to a story created by people who came from vassal kings and sort of an imagined but real oppression by a pharaoh who lived far, far away. Another group who perhaps joined them, good evidence for that, who brought another vision of God as a liberator God, not just a repurposing of the Canaanite pantheon, but a God who liberates us. And ultimately, it gets into our hands as modern Jews, who now look at it in unique ways as well. Humanists with our focus on human responsibility, but we're not alone in that. Traditional Jews, too, place that emphasis, even as they hope for a possible supernatural solution. Boy, this has just not been that computer's night, has it? We'll get it there. We'll get it there. Through its development, a story about freedom, a ritual of identity formation, it also became a framework from worry, freedom from fear, freedom from oppression, freedom from hunger. You can probably think of 1,000 more. And that's what I chose to focus on when I created the Haggadah we have, that universalistic idea. But we are also Jews, and so we link it to our particularistic story. And somehow, as Jews, we've managed to keep both of those threads alive. And I hope that you'll do so as well this year, as always, at your Passover Seders. And I hope if you didn't know something tonight, you learned a little something. And even if you forget it, well, we have many Seders and many Passovers ahead of us. So I will do what all the traditional rabbis did in those days and tell you, by Wednesday night, all the chametz needs to be out of your house. And Thursday, I'm sorry, never mind. Okay. Chag Sameach, everybody. And, oh, we got the song lyrics up. How about some applause for Arthur? Yes. I thank him every week for doing the slides, but you never realize what truly goes into it. Thank you for doing that. Thank you to David for the streaming, to Joseph for the beautiful music, and thank you, Gales, for the Oneg Shabbat tonight in honor of your father, right, Linda? A blessed memory, and to all of you. And we'll be back in this room on the 10th, but hopefully some of you will join us on the second night. But if not, I know that you'll be in very, very nice places, and that's what I wish for you for this holiday. All right, our little Adon Olam. Let's finish with that.
Adon Olam hu shir Adam, Ohev Chaim v'ha'olam, Kol ole b'shir shalom, Uva'adam nifsach halom. Before our time the world began, and from that dawn our story ran, through nature's law and life's design. We seek our meaning, yours and mine. No hand unseen directs our way, yet purpose grows with each new day. Through heart and thought, through joy and pain, we shape the good that will remain. Adon Olam, that song are we, our world steered by humanity. Our love of life stirs songs of peace. Within us all such dreams increase. Adon Olam hu shir Adam, Ohev Chaim v'ha'olam, Kol ole b'shir shalom, Uva'adam nimsach halom.
Shabbat shalom, Chag Sameach.